Hey, everybody, this is the Kubernetes Working Group Device Management meeting for January 21st. And let's get started. Patrick, you're the first one on the agenda here.
Okay, so this is a heads up that something that people complain about in the current DRA has been fixed. The cell cost limit was not applied correctly to cell expressions that use attribute strings and operations that depend on the length of the strings. The example from Kevin was a regular expression against an attribute string, and that basically failed to be created. The resource claim failed to get created because it didn't pass validation. Root cause has been identified. It was missing injection of the actual length that we have a limit for into the cell environment. The question that we are facing now is whether this fix should be cherry-picked to 132. The link that I have in the meeting minutes is the cherry-pick PR. It's worth calling out that the policies in Kubernetes for cherry picks don't actually cover normal bugs. So the guidelines are it must be a regression, so something that worked before breaks in a new release. It must be a critical bug, something that causes data loss or completely unexpected behavior. And none of that really applies to this one here. It basically just never worked to do attribute matching or operations with attribute strings. I still think, and I think Kevin agrees, that we should still ask for a backport, but it needs to be pretty much acknowledged by SIG authors or SIG leads. We all need to agree on it and then convince the release team. It was Jordan too who called that out in the original PR review because it touched on a few API files, so he got pulled in as an API reviewer. Yeah, that's where we are. And
okay, Jordan did not think it should be, or he didn't.
Jordan thinks that it should not, that it doesn't meet the current cherry pick guidelines. So it would have to have additional justification to become cherry picked.
Yeah, so Patrick pointed out that in the guidelines, even though it says that this doesn't meet the criteria, there is a backdoor that says unless you can get justification for doing so. And so that's what we're trying to accumulate in the conversation on the PR right now.
Okay. I mean, to me, it seems it's not critical in the sense that it's crashing or security or something, but like it kind of is pretty limiting in the functionality, right? If you can't do this.
Sure. I mean, the example I have right there that's on the screen, like it's just a simple match against the product name, and it says, sorry, you can't create this cell expression because it exceeds the cost limit.
Yeah, that doesn't seem. Is it only when you use regex, or it's just
no? It's any operation on that or that depends on the length of the string.
So even
we had a similar. Sorry, we had something else with a Gaudi DRA or with a QAT DRA driver. So my colleagues also ran into this.
Yeah, this seems pretty severely limiting. Like, I mean, just an equality comparison would be, I guess, maybe the other thing it's comparing to has a fixed length, so then it doesn't care. I don't know.
I haven't tried that, but yeah, I'm not sure whether it's intelligent enough for that, so that you can do string comparisons. It might work because, as you said, one side is a limited length.
Yeah, one thing I would ask you to, before we push for a cherry pick, Kevin or whoever could try, if you put, put a length of device attributes, GPU, NVIDIA.com.product name less than 100, right? In your left hand, and see if it's short circuit Booleans, like, or if it's smart enough. I doubt it's smart enough. Maybe it is to say, oh, okay, now we know that it's no more than 100, and so we can the second half of the clause, right? If that's an and it's short, it'll from a cost perspective, You know, it might be smart enough to know that, okay, now it's limited to that length. I kind of doubt it, but it might be worth a try. Do you understand what I'm saying? Am I being
I do.
clear?
I do
No,
understand.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I
understand.
understand
I can make that
It might be a
experiment.
workaround, right? In which case we don't have to, we can reserve our social capital for the next thing that comes along. So,
I mean, I think your point is instead of having this regular expression, do something much more simple to point out, like even this doesn't work.
No, I think
actually what I meant was, right, if I were looking at it as a human, I would say, okay, yeah, I don't know the length of that thing, so I can't evaluate that. But if I had a clause here that said the length is less than 100 and what you've got here,
Okay.
I
And
would
then
know the
and
length
what
is
I
less
have
than.
here. I see.
Yeah.
Got it.
So if it's super smart, it might be a way to basically inject that information as a workaround in the expression, which is horribly and hideously ugly, but it works, right?
At least there's a way to make it work.
Exactly. Yeah. Jack?
I'll do a guess and say that there were no unit tests for this. Did additional unit tests ship with this fix?
yes, of
And then,
course. Yes.
okay, that didn't mean implied they hadn't. And
yes,
a follow-up question is really like, since a unit test would have prevented us from sort of landing this in 132 without actually supporting this behavior, which we expect to support, should we do a follow-up task to like potentially interrogate KK for, is there like a place where there's a canonical complete set of unit tests for cell expressions across certain functionalities? And then do an audit to make sure that,
no, it wouldn't
Go
work
ahead.
because this is specific to DRA. So this whole expression, device.attributes something and then a field name, that is only something that occurs in DRA. So we would have had to notice that this is missing in the DRA cell environment. And it wasn't noticed during the review period. I explicitly, there's one line actually where I said we are not using a size estimator because the length limits are set. And my reviewers didn't call me out on that statement because it seemed plausible. It seemed plausible to me because some limits were set, but not all. So this one line then immediately, once we identified the problem, stood out as the culprit, but it had to be noticed first. That's the same problem with unit tests. If a developer doesn't think of a corner case, they are not writing unit tests for it, and therefore it's not called.
Yeah, so this actually came, the way I discovered this, at least in my setup, is I have it's not a unit test, but just in my DRA driver, I had this and it worked for V1 Alpha 3. And then the minute I updated to V1 Beta 1, tried to rerun my test, then it failed. But that's obviously after the fact, after it's been merged, rather than as a unit test while we're developing it. Yeah, so maybe we need to start, maybe at least me and you, Patrick, we should sync on what tests I have in my driver to make sure that those work if we ever update them.
Oh, Rita's point is good. That actually is kind of a regression then. It worked in V1 Alpha 3, it doesn't work in V1 Beta 1.
Okay, well, we can use that argument. I was thinking V131 because that was the previous release, and I didn't consider that we had alpha versions where it worked.
It did work because you didn't
Yeah.
have any cost estimate yet.
Yes, we didn't have
all.
we didn't have a cell limit
Yeah.
yet in one of the
Yeah.
early alphas, and when it got added, and that caused, well,
That's a regression. I think that's a
yes.
regression.
Yeah.
Something that used to work doesn't work anymore.
Thanks, Rita. That
Thank
was
you,
excellent.
Rita. Okay, you don't have to worry
Saves
about
us
the
a lot of
worker
lot of
business. I think we can
yes.
justify it.
Yeah. Let's do that
If
because I think any manual workaround is just going to be ugly. And I think that you didn't scroll further down. My argument actually was we want people who are on 132 to write cell expressions that the way they should be writing them, so that we get this feedback.
Yes.
Yeah, I think my larger point is sort of to that, like we advertise cell expressions as a really flexible, expressive way to declare a broad set of constraints. That's great. The point is, are we testing all of our, at least all that known matrix to make sure that when folks feel empowered to go write those cell expressions that they actually work? Is
I
that a
think
work
it's a matter
stream that we
of
want to kick off?
Well, we can. I think there is one issue open about improving our cell experience, identifying things that people write in real world, in the real life, and how to write that efficiently, whether it works. That certainly is worthwhile. So I did test those expressions. I did test looking up. I think I did test string comparisons. So the lookup that I had implemented, that was covered by unit tests, just not this one corner case of someone then applying a function like regex or well, string comparison actually works. I think that's what I tried. Just not this variable length special case.
You probably compared it to a fixed string, right? And so
Yes,
then
and that must have worked. Yeah.
Yeah, because then it uses the length of that fixed string, yeah.
Okay, cool. One like simple scoped audit we can do is look through the example DRA driver YAMLs out in the wild and just make sure that some of those, as Kevin discovered, are inherited from prior versions of DRA. So maybe it used to work in the past. At least we can scope that down, but maybe the engineer doing that work will then start to develop a complete feature matrix and then make sure that they all work.
Yeah. The thing is that people are still, even now, just starting to experiment with cell expressions, because all the drivers that support it are just being rolled out for 132. So we are in the phase where we are gathering more experience with cell as we go along, feeding that back into the unit tests that we have, so that things that people do in practice, that this is covered by unit tests, that's worthwhile. But we first need to have people who actually write something. Anyway,
I think that's great. I think Jack's point is what Rita said, like, let's just maybe sync with Cece and Joe and say, hey, do you have a list of things we should, like a routine set of how to exercise cell pretty fully, and we can then adapt that to the sort of special circumstances of a inherently discoverable schema, which is what we have. That's a little weird in DRA. Awesome. I think we're good here. We should probably move on to the next thing. Kobayashi.
Yeah, we have guests from Japan today who are sacrificing their night to join us. I think they pinged me on Slack. So yeah, let's give them some time to talk about these caps. The first one might just be a reminder. I'm not sure whether Kobayashi-san is on the call. This is coming from, I can talk a little bit about it because I know what it's about. It's about the composable device, composable disaggregated infrastructure work that they are doing, and about connecting a GPU that is connected via PCI Express to a node. They want to be sure that basically the scheduling the port is blocked until the GPU is actually connected to the node. So which involves some kind of reconfiguration of a PCI Express switch. It all seemed fairly reasonable to me from a concept perspective. We discussed something about that earlier elsewhere in the network attached to devices issue. So it's all not a complete surprise. We just now need to make sure that it gets tracked as a cap, and we need to make sure that it gets reviewed. And I'm not sure whether I have the time.
Yes, excuse me, Kobayashi and I'm Jin Hase are joining this meeting, so I can explain the overview of CAP. So can I explain?
Do you want to display, you said?
Yeah, I share my
Yes.
screen, so please wait.
Let me do that. Let me find it.
Oh, I can share my screen.
I think I have to mute the co-host. Yeah, just a second. Okay, try now.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I explained the design details. So at first, the reason of this KPI I would like to explain. Yeah, our target is composable disaggregated infrastructure, and the composable system is a composable source pool and composable manager software. And in source pool, all components are connected to PCI or CXL switch. And composable manager controls the switches so as to create composable parameters by software definition. It has composable API and operator or Kubernetes may call the API. Once composable parameters are created, user can install any operating system or container infrastructure. And this is an important point for composable disaggregated infrastructure. This flexibility extends further with use of fabric devices, and fabric devices can be used by multiple Kubernetes clusters, not just a single one. And each cluster exposes the devices as a resource slice, allowing for efficient utilization of the device. So in this scenario, the resource slice representing a same fabric device might be selected in multiple Kubernetes clusters simultaneously. So if the attachment fails in one cluster, the pod will remain in a failed state in kubelet. So by having the scheduler wait for the fabric device to be attached, we can reschedule the pod if the attachment fails. This approach is superior because it avoids unnecessary waiting and allows for immediate rescheduling. So the motivation of KP is that.
So that makes a lot of sense. I would be happy to review this and help try and move this across the line for an alpha. I have some questions and thoughts, but it might be better done just on the cap. Like, I'm wondering, I think you said somewhere a readiness flag of some sort, or maybe a condition. We have conditions on the resource claim status now as part of the network cap. We need to figure out, I'll be happy to work with you on this. Does anybody else want to discuss it more here, or should we?
Let's move it to the caps because there were quite a few things on the agenda, but I'm happy to review this as well. I also have a bunch of questions, but I don't think we should use the meeting time for that.
Okay. So this looks really, really interesting. We have use cases for this here too. So I think that, we'll just have to work through some of the questions everybody has.
Okay, thank you. And currently, we are proposing there are two proposals, proposal 1 and proposal 2. And currently, we are considering proposal 2 is a better method. So if possible, please review which
on
proposal is
2.
better.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so my plan this week is there's like a dozen, maybe not a dozen, but there's a lot of caps and ideas in the queue, and like I want to get through all of them and get them all to a draft state by the end of this week. Tim Hawken is out this week, so trying to tee things up for him for API review for next week because he's going to get real busy, I think is good. So anyway, that's kind of my overall plan. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Do we want to pull in API reviewers already for the caps?
We can discuss that. Like, I know I want to get Tim's at least high-level blessing. It just makes things go a lot smoother later.
Yes, I fully agree. It's just the question of whether we want to try it or what our chances of success are.
Yeah,
Good.
I know.
We can move on to the next cap. That would be me, I suppose, if I remember the agenda for today correctly. So I think I mentioned admin controlled device attributes already. The discussion has evolved a little bit. I was planning to use this generic mechanism to have just one special attribute that says the device is offline. And it turns out that this is probably better served by a special taint API. So I created another cap, which ended up being 5055, where the same new resource slice override type now has a dedicated API for setting taints by an admin, and resource slices can also have taints for devices. So, and then resource claims have tolerations. It's all very similar to node taints, except that we are applying it to devices. So these two caps kind of go hand in hand, and that's why I have one pull request updating both cap readmes in lockstep, basically, because one is depending on the other, at least for some functionality. So the admin control part, that is based on the observation that we can't really have an admin modify resource slices. If that's something that we allow and support, then this user intent or the admin intent can get lost when uninstalling a DRA driver, for example, which would just be really bad. So we need, I think, a separate type, something that is completely controlled by the admin, and we need to mix that into the actual device representation from the resource slice, and then can act on that in the scheduler and to when considering, well, taints and tolerations. So that's the
We talked about this.
a common
We
idea.
talked about this. We talked about this in detail a couple of days ago. One thing that occurred to me since then is if we want to limit this struct to just being this admin attributes, or if there's more we might want to put in it later, like health information and some of these other things. That's the only kind of outstanding question in my head, is because there might be other patterns where we want to be able to say, oh, we have this separate object that an admin controlled that links these two. And do we want to limit to just this taint and toleration operation, or more stuff in the future?
Well, it now already has two usages, device attributes and device taints. And those are separate fields in that common resource slice override. And I'm actually talking about that in vocab. You could disable the device attributes part and still keep device taints enabled. And then you can just create a resource slice override with taints, but not with attributes. So you would get the second cap, but not the functionality from the other one. You would still need the same type. So the type would be common, and what fields you can set depends on which features you want and enable.
You want to use, okay.
I wonder if those should just be the same cap, but we can talk about that. Like if they're the same API object, like if we don't implement the full set, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we can discuss. It has two feature gates at the moment because these two things might evolve at a different pace again. We've had that with the admin access. I'm kind of leaning towards just keeping it separate for now, because then we have the ability to say, okay, admin control device attributes was a bad idea. Let's not do it. And we can still continue with the other one.
Sure.
For example,
right.
Because the idea, the use case for device taints is fairly obvious, I think. For overriding device attributes, perhaps less so. But
it's a little tricky though, because if you think about, I mean, I guess the taints would only be administratively controlled, whereas the tolerations are user controlled, just like with nodes. Yeah. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we talked about in the past, that's similar but doesn't require Kubernetes API changes is something in the driver level, but that would only be under control of like a file, right, that we dropped on the node. That would be under control of somebody who owns the node. Like I could use that here at Google because I could like say what your network interface is wired to, right? Like that kind of thing.
So
we
that's
can
an
also use
alternative
this-
to an alternative to device attributes, but it wouldn't give you the device tainting and health status thing.
Right, and it's more limited, right?
It's
a
limited to the
different-
specific DRA driver. You need to have a DRA driver which supports such a mechanism, and it wouldn't be
and you
generated.
need the right access, right? It's like potentially a different user. Okay, all right. No, that's a super interesting one too.
The usual stuff. We need to get it tracked. We need to get it reviewed. At this point, I'm not sure who the approvers for SIG node and SIG scheduling should be for all of this. I think we as a group need to get familiar with these caps and prioritize perhaps, and then ask for reviewers from the SIGs.
We have to decide. So I met with SIG scheduling a couple weeks ago, and like, and I met and I've talked with folks in SIG node. You Patrick as well mentioned this to me on Slack the other day. Like SIG node has a lot going on. Anything that doesn't actually have SIG node, like we're not touching kubelet, we're not touching DRA driver frameworks, we're not touching gRPC APIs on the node. We're not touching PodSpec. Like I kind of wonder if SIG node doesn't need to be involved. We can talk to the approvers there and see what they think, but they always had the longest list of caps, and then DRA, we're dumping a lot more on them. So if there's anything that's just scheduling, we should try and have SIG scheduling on it, not SIG node, and work with SIG scheduling on it as much as possible. I mean, they don't have a lot of bandwidth either. We have to deal with that, but I just
might not be better.
Right. So from the SIG. Okay, sorry. From SIG scheduling, so I will be probably the first one looking into that, and I can forward later to Aldo for his review and approval.
Yeah. How much can we still rely on Aldo? Isn't he?
So not much. So I'm trying to make as much as possible on myself. Although, I also have several other things I'm.
So Dominic is here at Google. He's working on this, and he's coming up to speed and trying to get on the path to becoming an approver at SIG scheduling. But that takes time. Aldo is still working with him, and Aldo will, he'll do a first pass of the reviews for Aldo, like you were saying, and then go over them with Aldo. The other lead on SIG scheduling from Apple's been super helpful too. But we have to be conscious of their bandwidth. I'm trying to get some other folks who were original SIG scheduling folks from years ago involved. We'll see. I'm working on that. So I'm trying to work on getting the bandwidth up there. We have a couple of other people here at Google who might be interested in diving back into SIG scheduling, but it's, everybody's got a lot going on.
Okay. Sergey, did you want to comment? Did you think that SIG node should or should not be involved?
I'm sorry, I joined very late and I'm not sure what is being discussed.
The discussion here was we have a lot of caps, and SIG node already has a lot of caps. And I was saying, if there's anything that doesn't touch kubelet, doesn't touch gRPC APIs on the, doesn't touch PodSpec, doesn't touch, like, if there's things that are reasonably not super SIG node heavy, do we need SIG node approvers? And we wanted to have that discussion with the SIG node approvers to try and not overwhelm SIG node, which already has the most caps of any SIG, even without DRA.
I think just notification will be nice, especially if it doesn't touch much of a node code. Just awareness is ideal. I don't know how much interest it will be to review what SIG scheduling is doing. So maybe a little bit just to understand what's happening, but I don't think it'll be super strong. As you said, like
I think
so many things to think.
the main reason it needs to be decided is that that dictates which folder we create the KEP under in the enhancements repo. 'Cause I think
Yeah,
until now we've just been creating all the KEPs underneath the node repo or the node folder in the repo. And so yeah, we'd need to consider moving it to the scheduling repo.
So I did that with the prioritized list one last cycle because it was like, wait, there's nothing here that's actually SIG node. It's all done on the scheduler side for claim matching. So we moved that to SIG scheduling. So my point is really just, as you're looking at these KEPs, don't just default to SIG node. Look at it and go, oh, this only ever touches scheduler. I should put it in SIG scheduling. And then we'll work with SIG scheduling to make sure that, we get as much bandwidth as we can there.
Okay. In that case, I probably should move both of my KEPs because it doesn't touch kubelet. It's really just API and some code running in the scheduler. Yeah.
Yeah, the chains and tolerations on devices. I mean, I think SIG node probably wants to be aware of those things, like Sergey said.
Yeah,
probably doesn't need to approach.
Let them know that things are happening with DRA, but it really doesn't need 2 SIGs to approve. One should be enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
And I think that also applies to the DRA device attached before pod scheduled, because that is something that happens before kubelet gets involved. So same argument applies there.
But doesn't something has to run on the node at that one, right? How else is it going to get attached?
It's not kubelet. Kubelet doesn't need to know. It's all the DRA driver and something that happens in the scheduler.
Okay, I need to read the KEP again.
Yeah.
Read us.
I think that each KEP requires a SIG reviewer approver, right? In the KEP. In the
KEP
metadata.
YAML.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but we can decide which SIG.
Sure, but most of the DRA stuff is under SIG node, right? So I'm just pointing out that the KEP requires it. So
it requires us to pick a SIG as the sponsoring SIG, and it requires approvers from that SIG. And optionally, there can be approvers from other SIGs if you're touching their code or like in their design. But and we can also, but I think that the point is a number of these things actually don't directly impact the things that SIG node owns. They're like all happen before it gets to SIG node's things. And so those can probably be put under SIG
like
scheduling.
a different SIG then?
Yeah. SIG
so like
scheduling.
say the DRA admin one, maybe I should move it to SIG auth then, since it's more
It wouldn't be SIG auth because there's nothing in touching the authorization subsystem there, I don't think, is there? Well, I haven't read that one since you updated it, so
TLDR is yes, it does. So it probably belongs to auth more than node. So if that's the case, then yeah, node review will be sort of optional.
So on the node side, is there something we need to do so the drivers need to understand that it's an admin access, and the drivers might do we need to change any of the gRPC calls between kubelet and the driver?
No. I think it's another KEP where you can just basically say kubelet doesn't need to know, SIG node doesn't need to approve.
Okay.
Then
awesome.
Then is the call to action to move it to a different SIG then?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is that true for all the other KEPs as well?
We have to look at each one and evaluate each one.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good.
I think a lot of the original KEPs were in SIG node because a large part of DRA, especially when it was classic DRA, mostly touched node code. There was nothing really in the scheduler or very little in the scheduler because everything was outsourced to the third-party driver. Yeah.
I beg to differ. The whole scheduler plugin was probably the complex part of classic DRA, but
but there was a lot of
pod scheduling context was very much scheduler.
Yeah. Yes. Fair enough. It grew out of SIG node because
of our needs, of our desire to have this. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Okay. We have, I think, Rita, I think we talked about US, but I think it got reviewed. We know how to get it across the line. Let's talk about the third one, the dynamic device provisioning. So
Hello, Patrick. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay, can I just jump in, or you want to introduce something first?
Do you want me to give you permission to present? Or do you want me to just open this up?
No, it's fine. You can open the file. Yeah, and I can explain on that. I'm Sanyanan, or you can call me Pang as well if it's easier to pronounce. I work for IBM Research in Japan. Basically, I start the work on the network CNI for multi-link network before. So that is why I jump into the DRA in the network context first. I'm not sure you recognize. Yeah, so this CAP is originally started from the discussion under the CNI DRA drivers. That driver is worked as is with the SRI VCNI, but when we start talking about the MAC VLAN, IP VLANs, the device that we have to generate another device, the virtual device based on that, we reached some limitations that block us from the current limitations. That is why I start drafting this CAP. First, I found the similarities of this use case with the partitionables stuff that was already included in the previous CAP 4815, and I'm trying to reuse this, but it turned out like there's some more use case that I think is already written there. There is non-go, is not covered yet for the arbitraries of the device partitionings. So more like it's not, I mean, like this use case is not like partitions device, but it's more like the provisioning device based on some device source or like specifications. I wrote motivations in the motivation sections that yeah, is starting from the virtual network device, but I also found that it's having some similar use case that I talked to some people in research team working on the confidentials container as well, that they have a peer port where the device is not exit at the first place, but is will create on the fly based on some specifications. So we cannot define in the partition sections in advance, but we can define the source of the provisionings, and we provisions the device based on that specifications. So there's the motivations of this one. And I also found that it's also beneficial for the scope of the virtual GPU as well. Seeing from the examples from AWS or virtual GPU device plugin that they works on the vGPUs. Basically, they do not partitions. In my understanding, they do not partitions the device at the first place, but instead like define the parameters to limit the fractions of the memories to make sure that it's not like overlapped to the others pod that share the virtual GPUs. So it can be also used in that use case as well. I also wrote the user stories. Patrick, if you could go like a little bit for like 3 or 4 user story that I mentioned before about using the VLAN stuff or the GPU's fractions, and also introducing this DRA to the MAC VLAN IP VLANs also give us the benefit that the traditional CNI cannot give. That is the flexibilities of the source device selections that just only because we have the DRA, so we can do that. So I think it's beneficial in that case as well. In terms of the change of the API that it proposed, I basically introduced a new term of device source, provision limit, provision request, provisions device, as I already put the detail in there. Yeah, I don't want to go into detail that much in this meeting, because I think we can discuss more offline in the maybe the GitHub PR. I haven't created the CAP PR yet because it's my first time to write to Kevin. I'm not sure like what is the right process. Can I just like go ahead creating the issue, create the PR link to that in that way, or should I get like some opinions or like
So this is awesome, by the way. Super cool. I think there's a little bit of a trifecta here between, or actually a quadfecta, if there's a word, between partitionable,
Mhm.
between the one that was previously
Yeah.
discussed by the people from Japan, between this and between another one that Marlo from SketchMD is going to be putting together around how to manage CPUs. And one of the ways to do that is there's a couple different scenarios for how we might do that. And one of them fits into this similarly, which is per device allocatable resources. So this is great. Well, you can just absolutely just create an issue, create a CAP PR, and we can review it there. I am going to want, and maybe where are you in Asia? Like, I'm trying to figure out time zones. Maybe we can call a special meeting later this week to get all these groups together, because I think that there may be a way
To solve
like
all the
some of
use
the things
cases
that are,
with one design.
yeah, exactly, Kevin, right, exactly, because like partitionable has some of these aspects, and like, there's just so many, there's a lot of overlap here. So it'd be nice if we can try and reduce the surface area, but meet all the use cases by, by combining some of these things. So if you want to, people who are involved in all of these CAPs can let me know their time zones. I can try to find a
Here,
time.
I'm in Japan time zone, JST.
You can, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. This is really great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for showing up here. Thanks for sacrificing your midnight time slot for us here. Yes, talking about a proposal first with some potential reviewers is also part of a process. So it's good that you showed up here and made us aware of your need and that you already prepared something. Sometimes in the CAP template, when you create the issue, it asks you for a link that records or documents the prior discussions happening around that. I think that's just meant to discourage people from just really throwing anything into the issue enhancement issue tracker. But you clearly did the legwork beforehand, and that's fine. And once we're recording or this meeting is up, you can just link to that one.
Okay, thank
One
you.
of the just as a, like, often we tend to do discussions on Slack or in the meeting or in Google Docs a lot, because it's super collaborative, quick to go back and forth with comments, and then move it to GitHub once we get a little bit of a form. That's just for convenience. This is absolutely fine the way you did it as well.
Oh, okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Boy, we already had a long list, and now there's so many more new things that weren't even on my list personally. So
Yeah, I didn't even list any of the CAPs I was planning to look at on the agenda today. I guess we
isn't
talked
bad
about
though,
it in the past.
because we'll end up with the right design, I think, with enough use cases.
Yeah, but there it sounds like Kevin might also have some other things. So
No, not directly related to this.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the good thing is that these are CAPs that also have authors who are willing to put in the work and actually get it implemented. So my bigger concern is now not the numbers. Well, numbers of CAPs is a problem because we need reviewers, but
Yes.
it looks like it all has, or at least the things that are on this list here all have owners, and it looks doable from a code perspective to me. Even though I haven't looked in some of these new ones.
I think that the challenge is going to be the next 3 weeks of getting the designs nailed down and agreement, and then getting all the reviewers from this. So
It's always the problem.
Yeah, we have this is a substantial amount of scope we're discussing here. Like we have, but I'm excited. Okay. Anything more on that, Peng, or are we good?
I'm good. Yeah, maybe like setting up the meeting up within this week also is like great for me. I also would like to collaborate to the existing CAP as well as possible.
Okay, excellent. All right. Rita, did you want to say more on the DRA admin access, or did we cover it?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think the call to action is to move it right to a different stage.
Yeah, and if
then
it's
we'll just
catching
keep
off, good.
iterating.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome, thank you. Sergey.
Yeah, I added this one again. I coded a lot last cycle, but I didn't get it to completion. It's about reflecting device failures in a pod status. We already implemented it for device plugin. So device plugin already have information about failed device when device attached to the pod is not working. Here we want to introduce it pure on node level. So if device fails, DRA will have a new API that it will export as a gRPC, and this API will tell Kubelet that this device is not healthy. So Kubelet will mark it as a pod status. So this is purely information for end user. At this stage, we don't plan to do any reaction on this from Kubelet perspective. Like Kubelet will know the device is not healthy, but it will keep pod running. There will be no remediation actions and such. And we also don't plan any server side, like any notification about resource slice health or anything like that. So it's purely node local pod status information right now. In future, we can extend it to other things. And I have another topic about reliability later on agenda. But this cap is very limited to this local pod status and device health and pod status.
Okay, so Sergey, you, I know we discussed this.
Yeah, I have
Did
somebody to work on that. Yeah.
You have somebody to work on it, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, so we have our board, which we can go over here today. We should make sure that this one, and I think this would be you to do it, probably, Sergey, is make sure that it's milestoned and opted in. And then we have our board that we're gonna, as we evolve all of these caps, because there's what's on the screen is only maybe half of the caps we're talking about. We need to make sure all those get milestoned in and opted in. Okay, Polly, next topic.
Yeah, I observed basically it became apparent that we do have contributors from Asia who are now really interested in working with DRA and owning some caps. So the question came up, could we try to be more flexible with our meeting times so that folks from Asia have an easier time to join us live for cases where that's useful. I know the batch working group, I think they try to set up a second meeting that's Asia friendly, and I'm not sure whether they are alternating or just run more meetings. I can offer to join a meeting early morning European time, which overlaps a bit more with Asia, but then that would be a meeting where we basically would split the meeting between Europe US and Europe Asia.
I think it comes down to if our contributors from Asia are, want to do that. I'd be willing to join periodically, depending on the date and time. But I've certainly done meetings with Asia many times before. So I may not come every time, but I'm open to that. I would probably do it. Like we only have bi-weekly meetings right now. Maybe we do it in the off weeks or something. It would bring us to weekly meetings, which is a lot. I don't know how other folks feel, but Node does weekly meetings, but it's kind of a lot, in my opinion. But we have a lot going on.
I also have
if we did the weekly.
Yeah.
Sorry, if we did it weekly, I would say we do alternating, right? On the off week, we would do something
Yes.
in European morning time.
Right, that's what I'm saying, we
Yeah,
would,
okay.
rather than alternating our bi-weekly, which would mean once a month for each time zone, that seems a little bit too sparse to me. If we want to add an Asia-friendly time zone, I would probably add it as a second meeting on the off weeks that we have, what are currently our off weeks. That would be my preference, but
That would
do we
work for
have
me.
somebody from, I guess the question to me is actually, do we have somebody from Asia who would want to host that meeting, right? Because Patrick may be able to be there most of the time and host it, but I think it would be good to have somebody, I don't know, you tell me, Patrick, like, is that necessary or would you be happy to host it every time?
I can try. I can't promise. That's a problem, perhaps.
I can also host it. So.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So we
maybe
would
then-
have two people who can host. We can try. If it turns out that there is not enough attendance or we lack relevant people because they are in the US, we can stop again. But I think we should try and see how much we get to discuss there.
Okay, so then our next step would be to send out a doodle poll or something like that and see what the best time is.
Yeah, and perhaps gauge how much interest there is. If we don't get any responses, we don't need to do it.
Asked, yes, it's answered that.
Yeah.
Is moving the meeting an hour earlier helps in any way, or is it acceptable?
I think it's still midnight in Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I think it's even later.
Well, yeah. Okay. John, can you do the doodle? And then
I'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I'll probably do it. I'll probably do a Google survey or something.
Or something. Yeah. Well, like you did with this one here, but we're running
I think that's
now,
what I did for this. Yeah. I don't spell Gator.
Okay, 5 more minutes. Sergey, you still have time.
Yeah, thank you. So I started this document about infrastructure reliability, and I realized that we have issues for some of those things. Like we have issues for seamless upgrade of DRA plugin. That all good. What I wanted to reach in this document, and like I got this question also, like what is the document asking for? Like, is it only kubelet changes or it's DRA changes? I think it covers a lot of them. So it covers best practices how to write DRA plugin, plus what changes we need on kubelet to make it better. So one very simple example is kubelet. When it fails to register plugin first time, it wouldn't retry. And recovery from that is very expensive. You need to restart kubelet or like re-register your DRA socket. So it's not like ideal situation. So adding retry on kubelet sounds like a good improvement from reliability perspective, especially given that kubelet has a very aggressive deadline, like timeout for registration of a plugin. Other questions, those are kubelet changes that covered, but then on the other side, on DRA best practices, questions like that may be like one question would be, do you need to open a socket for kubelet? Like, do you need to unregister your resource slices if you fail to open a socket for kubelet? So if you register resource slice, but then you cannot connect to kubelet because for some reason you cannot open a socket, do you need to unregister your resource slices? So like how ordering should be like in this sequence? How do you detect whether CDI devices are enabled on Containerd or like CRI-O where you're running? And what do you do if CDI is not enabled? Do you not advertise resource slices and there's like failure mode that like there is no devices, or you somehow advertise them but then fail a pod to fail to run a pod? So this document is mostly questions. It doesn't offer like answers yet, and I hope to get to situation when we listed all the questions and then we started putting answers in place, and maybe GitHub issues for individual questions, like how to address retries on kubelet, how to address like DRA best practice on whether to still kind of like unregistered resource slices or do something else with the resource slices if you cannot connect to kubelet and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's a attempt to describe this document in 5 minutes.
That's awesome, Sergey. And part of my personal goals for 133 are to make sure we've lined up and know everything we need to do to go to GA in 134. And so this is going to be a big part of that, I think.
Yeah, I think some of the things you mentioned are already handled. So I don't know if you tested them or if you just said, "Oh, I'm not sure if this is covered," but I can help go through this list and help answer some of the questions and/or work on fixing the things that aren't working right.
Yeah, some of them I tested, some of them I just didn't check. Like I didn't check like what DRA best practices, like how DRA handles failing to connect to kubelet. I just didn't check, and I put it as a question mark.
Good.
But
Yeah.
plugin registration, some of that is I tested that, like there is no retry on kubelet. I didn't find it, and there is no. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there is a retry after like some other things happened, but like not the first time. Yeah, so there are questions, and I try to categorize issues and categorize things. So it will be interesting. And most of these questions coming from device plugin, like I with device plugin, I've been looking at customers who had this edge cases, like customers who will restart the kubelet right before they need to register the pod. And in case of device plugin situation, a little bit different because there is a pod admission as well involved. In case of DRA, you just have sandbox creation failed, and then you may retry it, and then it's a little bit easier on DRA, but still there may be some unexpected consequences.
Okay, we gotta go. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we can continue discussion later. Okay.
Okay, thank you.